As a single mother to my 8-year-old son, Mark, I encountered a peculiar situation when he was 5 and I was 27. I live in a house inherited from my grandparents, located in a tranquil part of town where many older residents reside, and Mark and I still reside there. During the Christmas season, Mark and I were out doing holiday shopping for our family. Our trip included visits to the mall, several clothing stores, and a hardware store where I purchased a gift for my father. After wrapping up our shopping spree, I treated Mark to a meal of burgers and ice cream at McDonald's. Leaving the mall through the southern exit, we encountered a mall Santa greeting shoppers. He engaged in typical Santa Claus behavior, waving and festively speaking to us. The Santa then crouched down to speak to Mark directly, inquiring about his Christmas wish. Mark, holding my hand, moved closer to Santa, and I didn't object as he seemed like a friendly and regular mall Santa. Mark expressed his desire for a Nintendo Switch, which, coincidentally, was what I had planned to gift him. The Santa responded playfully, suggesting that Mark might receive his wish if he was good, glancing up at me with a wink. I responded with a polite smile. Our conversation then shifted to a more adult tone, discussing the chaos of the holiday season. The man mentioned he was employed by the mall, and I, perhaps unwisely, shared the challenges of being the single mom during Christmas, half-jokingly suggesting I could use Santa's assistance. The Santa made what seemed like a harmless joke, asking Mark if he had heard the song, "I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus." Mark nodded in affirmation. Then, Santa leaned towards me, presenting his cheek as if expecting a kiss. Intending to give him a light tap on his fake beard, I leaned in, only for him to abruptly turn his head, attempting to kiss me on the lips. I dodged just in time. His action was unsettling and forceful. He laughed in a Santa-like manner, but it lacked any warmth. I quickly ushered Mark away, hearing Santa's "Merry Christmas" as we departed. Driving past the mall's rear exit, I noticed the Santa was no longer by the entrance, a detail I regret not pondering more at the time. Back home, after unloading our purchases, Mark and I settled in to watch a Christmas movie. Our peaceful moment was soon disrupted by the doorbell. Not expecting visitors and considering the late hour for solicitors, I left Mark watching the movie and went to the door. Through the door, I asked who it was, and a man's voice claimed to be Santa. My anxiety spiked. I warned the supposed mall Santa to leave, threatening to call the police. He insisted he was returning something I dropped, but couldn't specify what it was, asking me to open the door to receive it. I reiterated my demand for him to leave. Concerned, I phoned the mall's management office, only to learn that they don't employ any Santas, implying the man at my door was acting independently. This revelation heightened my sense of danger. I returned to Mark, but my mind was consumed with worry, a nauseating sense of dread settling in my stomach. Needing a reason to move again, a few minutes later, I quietly slipped into the kitchen, away from the sound of the TV. Lifting the kitchen blinds, I couldn't see outside due to the darkness and the kitchen lights. However, I could hear a man's voice outside, chanting, "Ho, ho, ho." It seemed likely he was out there, possibly watching me from the darkness. With no other option, I decided to call the police to report a man dressed as Santa following me. I asked Mark to stay with the movie while I spoke with the police outside. Their prompt response offered some reassurance. A few nights later, the doorbell rang again, around the same time, or slightly later. Mark was already asleep. I was in the living room and quickly turned off the TV, then moved upstairs to my room connected to Mark's. The doorbell didn't sound again, but I didn't dare to go back downstairs that night. It was only the next day when leaving the house that I discovered a note attached to my front door. It was a typed and printed message. The note read, "Let me be direct. You probably know who this is. I didn't intend to frighten you the other night. After a long shift as Santa, seeing a beautiful woman can stir emotions. You and your son are adorable, and I'd love to be part of your lives someday. I felt a spark between us during our conversation. I know where you live, Now I just need your phone number. Please feel free to send me a message anytime, and perhaps we can arrange to meet. I apologize if this seems forward or excessive, but I'm someone who pursues what he desires. Wishing you a happy holiday season, just in case we don't connect soon. Here's my contact info. Regards, Ted. I was inclined to discard the note, but instead, I photographed it and informed the police once more, providing them with the note that included his contact information. The police indicated they would follow up, and by the next Monday, I received a call, presumably from a detective, assuring me that the individual would no longer bother me and to report back if he did. Thankfully, I never encountered the man again. I believe the police must have warned him of potential arrest should he attempt any further contact. This is a brief yet haunting recollection from my early years. I was raised in a typical suburban middle-class household. My sister and I adored Christmas as children. This incident happened when I was around 6, shortly after we moved into our new home. It remains one of my most vivid early memories, primarily due to its shocking nature. As a child, I always struggled to sleep on Christmas Eve, filled with excitement and anticipation. I would often play video games late into the night on my old TV, gaming until I succumbed to exhaustion. On this particular night, I was engrossed in a Star Wars game on my 1 pound. Needing to use the bathroom, I muted the game and stealthily left my room, careful not to alert my mother, who would disapprove of me being awake late on Christmas Eve. After using the upstairs bathroom, I was tiptoeing back to my room when I heard noises from the Christmas tree downstairs. My initial thought was of Santa Claus. I crept down the stairs and peered around the corner into the living room. The only light was from a flashlight held by someone. All I could see were the legs of an adult, crouched behind the tree, with a black bag on the floor. The man emerged from behind the tree, saw me, and gestured for silence, placing his finger on his lips and whispering that he was Santa. However, even at that age, I knew this wasn't the Santa I had been taught about. In a panic, I screamed for my parents, as loudly as possible. The intruder, seemingly overwhelmed, debated whether to take the bag of stolen gifts, but ultimately fled through the front door. As a child, I have a vivid yet unsettling memory from when I was around 6 years old in our family's suburban home. My sister and I were enchanted by Christmas, and I remember one particular Christmas Eve, unable to sleep from excitement. I played video games late into the night. Sneaking to the bathroom to avoid waking my mother, I heard noises from the living room. Creeping downstairs, I expected Santa, but instead, I saw a stranger's legs behind our Christmas tree, illuminated by a flashlight. The person, a man, was crouching with a black bag. When he saw me, he whispered that he was Santa, but I knew he wasn't. My screams for my parents sent him fleeing through the front door. My dad later told me he searched outside in his slippers, enraged and ready to confront the intruder. The Christmas tree was partially stripped of its ornaments, which were in the thief's bag. A sickening act, stealing sentimental decorations. My dad discovered the back door had been forced open, likely with a crowbar, judging by the damaged wood. Another nearby house had suffered a similar break-in, making the news. It was surely the same perpetrator. This incident, so vivid and frightening, remains etched in my memory from my childhood. In December 2020, my fiancé and I were settled in a house we purchased a few years prior, situated in a pleasant neighborhood, ideal for raising a family. This context made the events that unfolded 2 years ago even more startling. We were acquainted with all our immediate neighbors, including those living next door and across the street. The atmosphere was generally congenial, but the true nature of people often remains concealed. Our neighbor, Paul, who resided to our right, was always cordial during our brief interactions, though he was somewhat reserved. He was frequently seen heading in and out, presumably for work, although his occupation was unknown to us. For a few days, I noticed Paul's absence. His car remained stationary in his driveway, which was not particularly unusual. All our neighbors, Paul included, had already decorated their homes with festive lights. It struck me as thoughtful that Paul, a single man in his 40s, would partake in the holiday spirit. One evening, as I was belatedly setting up our Christmas lights, I observed that Paul's lights began to flicker erratically, suggesting a possible electrical issue. The following morning, leaving for work around 10 a.m., I observed Paul's car still parked in the same spot. Additionally, all his house blinds were drawn shut. This continued when I returned from work. The blinds remained closed, but his Christmas lights were illuminated. Paul's persistent presence at home was evident, leading me to humorously speculate with my fiancé that he might be in a period of deep relaxation. That evening, my fiancé pointed out the erratic behavior of Paul's Christmas lights. Observing the same, I saw the lights flickering chaotically, in a manner that seemed unintentional and disorderly. Feeling concerned and wanting to be neighborly, I decided to check on Paul and inform him about the issue with his lights. Approaching his house, I noticed all blinds were shut, making it impossible to discern if any lights were on inside. After knocking and receiving no response, I rang the doorbell. Eventually, Paul opened the door, and I informed him about the flickering lights, which, interestingly, had ceased. Assuring him I wasn't fabricating the story, he expressed ignorance about the malfunction and thanked me. Inquiring about his well-being, given his recent seclusion, he attributed his absence to not feeling well, but his demeanor seemed peculiar. Then a disturbing sound emerged from within his house, what seemed like a child's scream for help. Knowing Paul had no children, this was alarming. I almost questioned him about it, but hesitated, choosing instead to abruptly end the conversation and return home. There, I urgently advised my fiancé to contact the police immediately. I was stunned by the possibility that Paul might have an abducted child in his home. Shocked, my fiancé asked me to clarify, and I explained my suspicion that Paul had possibly taken a child. Feeling a sense of urgency, I contacted the police and reported hearing a child's cries from Paul's house, noting his lack of children and recent reclusiveness. I requested anonymity in the report, though I was aware Paul would likely deduce my involvement. The police swiftly responded, entering Paul's house under urgent circumstances. The harrowing discovery they made left me horrified. They found a young boy confined in the basement, where he had been trapped for 4 days, taken from a different town. The flickering of the Christmas lights, it turned out, was a brilliant survival tactic by the boy, who had ingeniously manipulated the lights from the basement as a signal for help, likely spotting someone through the small windows. It was during my interaction with Paul at his front door that the boy seized the opportunity to send out a distress signal. His intelligence and survival instincts were remarkable. Thankfully, he was safely reunited with his family. While I shuddered to think of what he might have endured, I hoped he could recover and move past this traumatic experience. Given the severity of child abduction, it was clear Paul would face a long incarceration.